the full sunshine that we've had the last few days, but being ginger and stuff, you need to kind of hide away from those bright rays.
Get that factor 30 on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Luke and the dog are both respecting a bit of muggy weather rather than that beating sun.
You got a dog?
Bruce, yeah.
Well, he's more than a dog.
He is.
He's a full member of Muck Spreader.
What kind of dog?
Well, that's a difficult question. Some people call him a dog, some people call him a seal, some people call him a badger. I mean, he's many things, but in breed-wise, he's a Staffordshire Bull Terrier. He's a little rescue boy.
Who calls him a badger?
My aunts, mostly my aunts call him a badger.
Our friends under the ground.
Exactly.
This isn't the dog from Woodhey, is it?
Well, the dog from Woodhey is like my dog from home is called Woody, and a lot of the lyrics from that song is my mother. It's things that my mum says about the dog. Don't worry about the dog. He's lovely, really. I promise you he won't bite, because he's big and scary and he's very anxious. He's another rescue, like a Belgian Malinois, and people are intimidated by him. So we constantly feel the need to apologise. Although he doesn't bite or hurt, he's just scared himself.
He's an archetype.
Well,
if you had to draw a dog that looked like it was a guard dog, it would be Woody. But he is the loveliest dog I've ever hung out with.
Like, the song is about like many different dogs. Like, originally when we first started playing, we had our own night in the Ivy House in South London, which is like a really famous old venue that Wilco Johnson, Dr. Feelgood, Ian Jury and people played. They tried to shut it down. It's got a grade listed stage, and the rules were always free entry, all ages, and please bring your dogs if you have a dog. So we'd play on stage with loads of dogs laying around us.
Some atmosphere.
Yeah, like we're here to love the animals, you know. We're like Muck Spreaders for the underdog. These guys ain't got a voice, so we feel like we need to represent those without voices.
There's a bond between humans and dogs that runs back a long time. They're basically like the wild side that we tame in order to hang around with us, you know. They're integral. They're integral to the way that I operate, you know. They teach me so much hanging around with dogs.
In terms of just like the fact that when you're looking after another creature, it teaches you a lot about yourself.
I think, yeah, understanding how they operate and then being able to kind of use their view of the world to kind of loosen up your own view of the world. You know, they're carefree, man. They live for the moment, and that's kind of beautiful. You know, they don't hold grudges. They don't get angry for too long. They don't get upset for too long. They kind of move on. They see things as they are. I watched a film called Stray recently, which was following the stray dogs around in Turkey, and it's just kind of beautiful to see dogs sort of interacting with humans in a completely natural way to the dog, even though they're kind of domesticated dogs. It was really worth watching. Had a little tear in my eye at some points, you know.
And the film White God, I think, is Bulgarian or something, about the pack of wild dogs that come and run and take over a town. Also another great dog reference. Woof!
Wait, hang on. They take over a town?
Yeah, it's like a pack of stray dogs. It's called White God. It was on Mubi for a while. It's a little bit arty, but we don't mean to be pretentious.
It's interesting. Well, you were kind of talking there about the dogs and what they can teach about living in the moment. And I know you're a fan of Joseph Beuys as well.
Yes,
yeah,
completely.
He's someone who's always kind of talking, or I guess believed in the value of process over product. Is that kind of coming from a similar thing, that idea of living in the moment? Is it linked to that idea of process?
It's so deeply involved and entrenched in Muck Spreader, of where we completely just allow whatever's influenced us on the day or the week or whatever leading up. We just take the moment, the hour, half hour on stage, the day or two in the studio. We're just completely committed to that moment, and the thing of Beuys, of everybody being an artist, is something we completely relate to. Well, I do, and I think I speak for the rest of the band saying so, that we believe in the creative potential of every human being and living thing.
Luke's really into Beuys, and I heard something about Beuys once, and I don't know, is it true that he was in a plane crash and he got really bad burns? Is this true?
This is what they say. Like, with him, there's many myths, like Tom Waits or Bob Dylan, that he landed in a plane crash and then got covered in felt and fat and taken into a village. I think I'm not sure whether it was World War II, but his plane had crashed in the villages and some villagers took him in, and that's where his relation to loads of the materials that he repeatedly uses throughout his work comes from.
Because for me, that just represents an idea that he took like trauma and then turn that into a positive experience for himself. And I think that's the kind of, that's it for Muck Spreader. It's that joy of taking the things that have happened to us in the past and then releasing them when we go on stage or when we go into the studio or when we hang out with each other. You know, for me, it's a release, you know, like therapy in a way.
100%.
Is that something you saw as well? I know you used to do like spoken word nights. Was it addiction clinics?
Yeah, it was a thing called Sickwell, which was run with one of my friends who deals with people in suffering states, and we just make a space as safe as possible for everyone to get up and express themselves. There's no judgment, but do you know there's a guy called Gabor Mate who's I can't remember where he's from, but he dealt with addiction and the relation to it with trauma in the streets of Toronto. So it's loosely based in this sort of thing of like, if you have a community and somewhere to express it, otherwise you like, lots of people write poetry and write things down and they just need like a collective or a community behind them to push them to be brave enough to express themselves. And once you've done it, to overcome that hurdle, it makes many other challenges in life seem like futile. Overcoming that hurdle of finding a space to be safe in. Yeah.
And a community, right?
Yeah, of getting a stage of like, so where we've just been on tour, an amazing boy called George Spence has been like our tour manager. He's a lot younger than us. And I managed to find out that he's a poet or a spoken word artist. And he's never performed. He's only done it online. So hella sure we keep pushing him and we're going to get him on stage and make sure he reads before this tour's over. We got a couple more dates left and we're going to drag George up and make him play. Because we know there's only good can come from it.
How long did it take you to find that space where you could be kind of free and creatively and feel safe in?
I started off initially, like I've always wanted to be involved in music. I began running nights and putting on events and then started a band. And initially I was in a hardcore band and my expression would be mainly driven by fear, and fear resulting in either anger or fast craziness.
Was that Zulu?
Yeah, Zulu. So that was my first band there, which I initially I was going through loads of stuff personally, and I started writing it, and that was a release, and I realised like how much more beneficial it is, like the process of making music rather than the result. When you kind of look back on that in reflection, does it almost feel like a stepping stone to get to the creative project now with Muck Spreader? Completely. I feel like me and Oscar, who sat with me here, we've been working together a long time in different guises and stuff, like performing but not under names, or like Muck Spreader. It kind of just happened that after Zulu broke up, I took some time away, and I used to just get on stage on my own and scream and shout, write, perform words and drag people from the crowd up. So initially Muck Spreader was just anyone in the crowd who would come and play while I'm reading poems. And then one of our friends, Clams from Woomdusha, was like, I've booked you for an actual gig, you need a name. So we decided to take it a step more serious, but always remain with the improv in the moment.
Yeah, and also the interlude at F Band. Yeah. We basically, me, Luke and a friend of ours were running a night in my house, essentially, and we had the spoken word at the beginning and then got a few bands in, and Luke kind of spearheaded a thing called F Band, which was, like he was saying, people who came along to the night. We had everything set up anyway, so we just got people up on stage and had a jam. It was good, man. And I think for me that was a moment where we started thinking, actually, improvisation is the freest form. It's the biggest release you can get from being with people and kind of everyone feeling like they're part of something. That for me, the community element of music, arts, poetry is really what it's about. And also like helping other people who are also struggling in their own ways to kind of say, look, you can be here, you can be who you are here. It's so cliche, but I think it's necessary, and I think it's good to repeat it so people know that it hasn't disappeared from this kind of like world we live in, you know?
Let's all struggle together rather than struggling alone. It makes struggling a whole lot more fun.
That's it.
What What do you think it means to be brave with music?
In order to challenge like what a lot of people are driven by expectations. They turn up to a gig and they either heard something online or they see what the other bands. In order to like step through and try and do something different. And it's brave for anyone who gets up on the stage. Like again, with our tour, there's a girl called Nuha we're playing with, and she gets on the stage every night on her own without a backing track, and that's brave. Like to get up with Muck Spreader, I have a massive team behind me. I look and I feel strength from them. To get up on your own is the bravest thing, and anyone does it in any capacity, regardless of the result. It needs to be celebrated.
Yeah, bravery is it's an interesting word for it, but I think it is brave to sort of expose yourself. Especially music is an exposition of yourself and an exposition of the people you're with, and I think that you have to be brave to do that. Not in a kind of like warrior version of brave, but just like from an inner workings of the word brave. You know what I mean?
Yeah, to open up to vulnerabilities.
Yeah. I mean, is it when you're in that creative space, you know, when you're, because a lot of the music comes from improvisation, right? For the most part, the majority.
Yeah, like one person on their own at home is starting off playing, they get a riff and they take it to other people, they develop the riff, and you write down the first things that come to your head and go back and analyze it. It's like the conventional way, perhaps, of writing. So it does take foundations. We're just taking it a little step further because we've developed the inner editing and filtering in our heads with the moment before. We self-edit as we're going along.
Yeah, I think with the live show, it's just this kind of synergy of people, and then in the studio it's slightly different. It's kind of we have the same attitude, but I think through playing live we develop an understanding with each other, and we all kind of understand how the next person works along. And it clicks, and you know that it's not always instant, but it happens, and I think that's where the magic is for me, man.
I'm intrigued by what you were saying there as well. You know, that idea of self-editing.
Yeah.
What exactly do you mean by that? What does that look like in practice?
For me, in practice, it's almost meditation. It's creating a space between your thoughts and being able to have a gap. Like where I make up all of the words on the spot always. I'm completely accepting of myself and all parts of it. I do, and I'm working constantly and trying to be a better person. So I have no fear or no filter of what I'm going to say. But from doing it so long, I used to write and I worked out the techniques I used to write, and now I'm just able to do that off of the cuff. So there's like an element of the self-editing is like you need to, in some way, find a rhyme, not at the end of each line, or not even in something from the line before, but you get caught in a flow and you're therefore like editing yourself because you're not thinking about what you say before you say it, but from the practices of meditation and stuff, you're able to gain like space and clarity between your thoughts.
So it's almost like you're able to slip into the tracks, but you don't know where the train's going. Would that kind of be an analogy for it?
Absolutely perfect. Like the thing I always use is as if there's like a beam of light or something going on above my head constantly, and I can just pick and choose to like unplug hardwired into my brain and just tap into the light above and just let that go, and then jump into that constant like train of surreal freestyle thought that's happening, like kind of like the Beat Poets or something with like with Jack Kerouac writing on the road all in one go, and stream of consciousness is what I'm looking for.
I mean, that what you were saying there, that idea of almost like tapping into the light above comes back to Boys again, and this idea of creating being like a shamanistic thing almost. Exactly.
It's completely, this is where like so much of my attachment, and the fact that Boyce also has a permanent exhibition in the Tate in London in normal times you can walk into free any moment, and I often just go and stand in the Boyce room, and like a lot of his stuff with developing his schools in Germany and planting the trees, I do believe that creativity has that not magical, but there's a part of it's something that can't be completely explained. It is shamanistic.
What about for you, Oscar? What does that headspace that you create from kind of feel like?
What, during performance?
I guess, yeah, performance, or even more so when you're in that improvisational space in the studio and kind of you're all operating as a group and creating.
for me, it's an interesting space because Luke and I lived together for a few years, and we would spend hours just chatting nonsense and also kind of freestyling over other people's beats and kind of practicing in that way. But in terms of musicality and playing the instruments and playing instruments, it's kind of, for me, it's a real inwards journey because it's a struggle. I'm not like a fully trained jazz musician. I don't come from that background. I'm kind of pretty much self-taught with the guitar or with the keys. So at the beginning, it was really inwards, and it would kind of be difficult for me to get up on stage. But I knew that by facing that difficult part of myself, that kind of uncharted part of my musical playing, it was a good thing to do. And it was actually teaching me more about like my fears and my kind of inhibitions and trying to kind of work around them. And as it's gone on, it's still a struggle, but I gain more joy out of performing, out of being part of something. You know, I work on another musical project, and that's a similar ethos, but it's like every time we're with Muck Spreader, it's like inwards, but also really much outwards, because you're standing there in front of people. You're standing there in front of people who are there to see you and there to enjoy what you have. And I just want to share that. So I'm trying to. It's kind of inwards and outwards. It's a good space to be in. I think
it's reciprocal. Almost all feeds in.
I think with the audience, it is.
Definitely. With people sitting down at shows, it's like normally we'll have like people jump around and whatnot, but that like you can see where we're very reactive to the audience, you know, and or like the style of night that we're playing on, we're completely adaptable. But with the people sitting down, I've had to find a place to, like, you'll get the same performance. I'm still going to jump up and down and go mad, but I need to find that drive within myself rather than like looking at the whites of the eyes of someone in the crowd or like seeing the person that the music's connecting with. Because for me, essentially, I'm an audience member as well. I just have the mic, like I'm feeding from the band. Wherever they decide to drive or take it will like completely affecting the output of my words and vocal, but I'm at the mercy of it as much as what the audience are. I don't have a clue what's coming next either.
I've really enjoyed watching people chair dance. That's been one of my favourite things. I think they should give everyone wheelchairs so that at least they can chair dance while they move about with the wheelchairs a bit.
It'd be like murder ball with rugby.
That's it, yeah.
Wheelchair rugby.
When you're in that space, you know, where you're sitting there, it's almost like a level playing field that you're one of the audience members. How do the roles that instinct and self-doubt play in that space compare? Personally,
I don't have any self-doubt. I believe completely that I'm born to do this. I have something important to say and share, and I think like that like we can really help people, you know, like because we're confronting our fears and dealing with issues openly that otherwise people, especially making guitar music and stuff, like you often find yourself amongst the outsiders and the freaks and the underdogs, and that's exactly where we are. There's no sense of ego, and if we spot it arising amongst each other, we police that. Not that we like police though, but we try and stamp out, you know, like I'm like often our tour manager, I noticed our tour driver had a guitar in the back of his van, and I was like, hey man, what, are you going to play with us tonight? It's that sort of, it's an open forum.
What about, I actually meant when I was initially starting off on that, I meant instinct and conscious thought. You know, those kind of two other sides of the spectrum. Yeah,
completely. I think instinct and intuition are obviously the key goal of what you want to achieve, is like to trust your instincts and to know and believe in yourself. Like often the first decision you make is right, and eradicating the questioning of yourself.
Do you mean instinct as in like the subconscious and conscious mind?
Yeah, like doing things without thinking, just following your gut.
Okay, yeah.
That's what I do.
Yeah, I think that they have to be balanced, right? Because obviously you're there, you're not in your own head when you're stood on stage with all these people around you, but you are in your own head with all these people stood around you. So it's like it's not always 50-50 with the sub and conscious mind states. I think that letting go to a point where your subconscious is taken over, but you're conscious of the movements and you're conscious of the noises and sounds and energy of the audience and the energy of each other. When I'm on stage and I look around, I keep my eyes on everyone, because it's important to make that eye contact, see the other people at where they're at, because you can just sense so much from people's eyes. You don't have to talk, you can really sense it. And like I try my best in gigs is to try and keep that energy good and keep that energy like happy, because I know that what we do as musicians behind what Luke is doing as a frontman and as a lyricist is like we create that backdrop, and that backdrop is integral to what goes on. And I think if we're not feeling it, then it's going to reflect on where Luke gets to stand on it. And sometimes that's a good thing, but I think in the majority of the time it's good to have that synergy between the music and the words and the performance, because Luke is a performer, and well, we're all performers, but you know, he's there, he's the one giving the crowd the eyes. You know, you got to give the crowd the eyes.
You've got to respect them.
Yeah.
You've got to respect yourself, and you've got to respect the microphone. It's such a privilege and an honor to be able to get on stage and to perform, or to even have a mic and to perhaps one person listen to what you're saying. It's so important. You've got to respect and be grateful for that. Any opportunity to play everywhere, because lots of people want to make music, lots of people want gigs, and we're lucky enough to have kept working at this, and now we've got opportunities to play gigs, and every time we must remind ourselves how lucky and how important it is to have this opportunity.
Yeah.
Do you have moments like that on stage where that's something that kind of all hits you and you get that clarity and realize how special this opportunity is?
Every time, man, for me.
Yeah, for me, every time, like well before I go on in the morning of the gig, I know that it's like this is work well beyond ourselves and the 7 members in the room, and it's an important practice. Like we are a collective. It's not. Muck Spreader takes so much more than the people that are on the stage. It's like the conversations you have with people during the week, or everything that's going on, especially with our friend Alice, who takes our photos and shot the Wood Tea video. She's integral in our process as well. And then also we have there's many people who are muckers. Like we have a fan called Johnny, who's from Cambridge, who comes to all of our shows and has been there from the beginning.
Yeah.
And he's like as much as part of the band as any of us are.
It comes back to that idea of a community thing.
Exactly.
100%.
And Boyce again.
He's going to keep coming back up in this chat.
You can see he's reoccurring.
He's the wolf in the room.
And he has that, also his idea of always wearing the fisherman's jacket and the hat, almost like Bart Simpson or something. Keeping this sort of the idea of image is also completely relevant in Muck Spreader.
The characters.
Yeah.
That's it.
The characters.
I mean, speaking of the characters, I'm trying to think, what's the song you kind of slip into the perspective of an atom bomb on again on the new EP?
Masquerade. I don't even. It's either Mass Graves or A Particular Shade of White. Is it the one that sounds like a Western?
Yeah, I think it's Particular Shade of White, isn't it? Maybe.
Yeah, Particular Shade of White, the Western one. We just shot a video for that. Yeah, the atom bomb reference there. At the moment, I didn't realize it, but listening back, is I'm calling the phone an atom bomb. There's a tiny little me living in your pocket. It's literally one day all of us will have one. It's the idea of the phone and the power of the phone is equivalent to an atom bomb, and the damage and destruction it can cause.
I think we're a lot less aware of that damage though, and the destruction that it's capable of.
What, the nuclear bomb or the phone?
The phone.
Yeah.
I think my generation has forgotten what a nuclear bomb is. Actually, I don't think people really think about what was going on in the 80s for our parents' generation. But the phone is definitely it's the bomb. It's the mental illness bomb. Actually, I think there's so much space on those platforms and programs. I mean, they do good for us with our Instagrams and all these kind of social media outlets, because it gives us a portal to communicate with people who enjoy our music. But on the same time, it actually, what I heard someone say the other day is that social media or the internet is the biggest drug of the 21st century. It's like booze is a drug. It depends. Some people can have a little bit in the evening and it's all good, and some people like to have too much in the morning and then it's not so good potentially. But that's what social media does, and it's that algorithm that can hook you in. Those computers are so intelligent. Those algorithms are, I don't know, I don't want to get into it, but the whole future of technology and humans is a very interesting space.
Like, I'd only gone back on when I'd taken my break from music and performing and stuff. I wasn't on social media at all. The only purpose of me going back on it was in order to promote the band. It's now such a necessity. Yeah,
to use it as a tool, not to be used like a tool by it, you know.
Many people, as soon as they wake up, like I'm victim to it often, they wake up straight away, they're gonna go look at their phone.
Coffee and phone in the mornings.
Well, I have a cigarette normally once as soon as I open my eyes, but how else am I meant to maintain this voice?
Tom Waits style out here.
Well, Louis Armstrong, but
I mean, talking of voices, what were you tapping into for the voice of the atom bomb or the cell phone?
I actually, like, again, that is part of being tuned into this higher light and the part, like being part of the moment. I'm not actually really aware of what I'm saying. I listen to it back and then find that there's meaning in it, obviously, but I'm not fully aware of the meaning or the metaphors or the picture that I'm painting until I've actually taken time to listen back and reflect on it, and I realise what I've said and its reference afterwards.
What about for you, Oscar? Do you feel like you're aware of it while it's happening when you're in that space?
Creating the music, I think it's like that balance I'm trying to find between going too much inwards and also going outwards with the actions, because too much conscious thought for me constipates what could come out, but if you don't think at all, then it can be a mess, and that sometimes works. We've done recordings in the past where I've just had no regard for key or timing, and that can sound interesting. It's kind of anti-musical, and that's got its place, you know, like just making a racket, like kind of calling back to people like Faust. You know, there's an element of there's a beauty in just noise, but I think that I like to think nowadays I sort of try and sit myself within the group, being part of the group, but being myself and feeling at ease with that kind of way of producing and that way of and with that way of kind of putting out creativity. Because I think it's too easy just to say, oh, you know, I just improvise and it's whatever, you know, it just comes out of my head. But I think what Luke's explaining to you is like, I think it's really good for his process. I think that I'm not quite there. As I said, you know, all the great abstract painters, all the greatest artists who end up painting like children do it from a place where they can draw perfectly. It's not that they set out one day to go, I'm an abstract artist. And I think that, as Luke said, through his writing it down, understanding his process, you know, he's really gone through that. But for myself, I haven't learned it all. So it's more of a balance. It's more of a learning thing as I go along. But that's what I really love to be. Yeah, that's for me how I do it.
We're all growing together.
Yeah.
Especially as a band, when we're together, we're all developing and constantly challenging each other, which is amazing, because you can see when bands rest on their laurels, when they go on tour and they play the same set every night, make the same joke between songs. They've become comfortable. When you rehearse too much and everything must be precise and on point, you become comfortable and look like you lose the moment of it because you're on autopilot. Where we're constantly, someone will always sonically try to challenge the others by being like, hey, this is where we're going. Are you ready for this adventure? Do you want to step in? Have you got your picnic blanket and sandwiches packed?
And also, I think some Muck Spreader at the moment, we have someone who's 19 and then someone who's in their late 50s, you know, so. And I'm in the 30s. Luke's a bit younger than me, and then I think that really feeds into it. There's a kind of, I like to learn from younger people. I like to learn from older people. Everyone's got something that they bring to it, and there's like, you know, and also the fact that we've got this variety of musicians. Some who are classically trained jazz musicians who have that knowledge, who are the kind of experts. Who letting go for them is like it's like really freeing, because they're so confined a lot of the time into these practicing runs for hours, practicing scales for hours, and they come onto the stage and, you know, I'll be open about it. When we play sets, I often have to turn to whoever's playing bass and go, what's the root note? what's the root note? Because otherwise I don't know where I'm starting. So there's that supportive element in that. And it's, again, coming back to community. It's like a little community of musicians, man, and creative people.
It's definitely a family. Beyond the band, with everyone that we come in contact with, where it's again down to respect. Like Muck Spreader, we got to respect each other in order to feel safe to go and do this improvising thing. If there's an element that's not working, then we try to address it and deal with it and help whatever the issue is overcome it. Yeah, like it completely is. It's a community that we're trying to create. We're not out here to be a band in the conventional sense. We're like out here to make everyone be artists. We want to, through being this free, and we want to inspire other bands to challenge the way that they write and think, hey, look, these guys are doing it like this. Is there possibilities that maybe we can change and break out of the orthodox? It's a little like Tyson Fury, the way that he switches stance boxing.
That's it.
It was interesting that you were talking about the kind of age range in the band goes from someone who's 19 to someone who's in their 50s. How do the lessons you learn from someone younger than you compare to the lessons you learn from someone much older?
With being older, you've got to respect that they're lucky enough to have been and existed on this planet in this form a lot longer than us, been on stage many more times. They've got like the wisdom of experience to draw on that naturally you want to learn. And the person younger, a lot of the time, it's their first experiences of touring or of playing this sort of shows, and you're like learning from their sort of, I'm not sure if it's their like intrigue or curiosity, like, and again, their understanding of where music and things are moving within a younger audience.
With someone younger being around, it's like they are tapped into a different part of culture in a way. They're also tapped into their view on life in a different way, and there's so much to learn from someone who's got fresh eyes on certain situations, because it's quite easy to get settled in your ways as you get older, of like, that's how it is, that's how it's done. And when someone's younger sees that archetype and goes, yeah, but I've always got time for someone to debate that, yeah, but, because I found throughout life is that the most interesting people older people I've ever learnt from are always ready to learn from me as much as I am from them. I think it's got to be reciprocal, these processes. And when someone's younger than yourself, as I said, it's like they live in a different world, which in Muck Spreader we're all part of. So it's like it's a reciprocal learning process the entire time.
Like, to think at 19 you're born and raised knowing the internet forever, really fast, Wi-Fi, smartphones, social media. In your 50s you remember the development of the internet and how much this has literally changed everything, especially in music and the way that it's like consumed by audiences and stuff. And that, like me, I'm 30 and I remember having to wait for my mum to use the phone to get on the dial-up.
MySpace.
Yeah, with the like, so this relationship with technology as well is also, it's huge amongst from younger people. They understand much more how to navigate this other world. Even that, I don't even want to begin with dating apps, but someone who's 19, 20 has been born in a world where there isn't, it's like one of their senses, the internet. Whereas I think Luke and I's generation, even though we're not far away from them, we do remember the time pre-smartphones. We do remember the time pre-podcasts, basically I remember
online.
The times when South London was so cut off that to get over to East London was a real event, and then to get home again was a real event. It's taking you 2 buses over an hour to get back before they put in these orange lines and change the dynamic of the city. Like, coming from South London, it's very difficult to move about to other parts of the city. We've always been the poorer cousin
There is an irony though, isn't there, for people who've grown up with the internet, is there's this ability for connectivity, but from talking to people who are in their early 20s, it really feels like they lack that community that we're trying to bring. So I think
it's a dependency for them.
Yeah, it's like the possibility of sharing everything, but the kind of the nightmare of isolation that comes with that possibility of sharing, you know?
I think COVID's proved that as well. When everyone's been cut off from these real connections with others and it's been reduced to digital, we've realised it doesn't work really.
Yeah,
really it doesn't. And like, the rise in terms of mental health difficulties and stuff that has come from the sheer weight of what social media and its expectations on people is wreaking havoc within young people's communities, and that especially with young men. And this thing of sharing is very modern, to talk about your feelings and to not have to adhere to perhaps how our parents and things with what was expected of a man.
Different expectations. I mean, the thing with COVID and lockdown, there are positives that have come out of it. I'm sure. Like, I don't know, within your field, have you missed did you work in an office before, or have you always worked solo? I mean, has it affected you?
Well, I'm still at uni, so it's affected me in that regard.
Yeah, because
we've been in digital the whole time.
Yeah,
and they're still charging you the same price. I know up in Scotland you've got the politics a hell of a lot better than what we have down here.
You got that free education, baby.
Well, you got the free education and free sanitary products for women.
There's also that thing of the right to roam in Scotland is a very important thing, to be able to be able to walk where you want to walk, as long as you don't damage or hurt anyone. This land should be for everyone, but unfortunately,
back to respect.
Yeah, man. England is slowly becoming more locked off, and to walk across a field, you could potentially get in trouble with an authority because that field isn't yours, even though it's kind of everyone's.
Living under the Tories for this long, you notice a hell of a lot of oppression. More and more coming in there, like under the guise of COVID, they've brought in so many laws that attacked the privacy and individualistic, like the collection of data now being the most important commodity over oil.
Well, we're being punished as the UK. We are being punished by the failures of a banking system with austerity, and austerity just means taking more from those who haven't got anything anyway, and that has affected everything. And I think that one of my reasons to want to go out and make music and show people to express yourself is key to understanding yourself and seeing the bigger picture. It is this fact that we have been living under kind of quite an oppressive idea of what freedom is, actually, and quite an oppressive idea of what normality is. And COVID
Muck Spreader brings freedom.
Exactly, mental and physical freedom. That's what it should be. I think that COVID has highlighted issues which have been sat just under the surface and been kind of papered over by consumerism for so long that actually there's only so much clicking online you can do to buy stuff. There's only so much time you can be looking at someone else's Instagram before you start thinking, what am I doing with myself? Like, how can I actually do something positive rather than consuming, whether it is monetarily or whether that is digitally or however you do it. But for me, consumption is kind of a problem, and I think that
you can become bloated. It's the same as when you eat too much, you become lethargic. Once you've taken in too much of others' ideas, you become less aware of what your own self is saying, and you're weighed down by consumption. Yeah,
there's a lot of false idols, man.
It's being pushed on us more and more, like the gluttony of content. It kind of repulses me, but
that's beautiful.
I say that from a position of still wanting to consume.
It's an interesting idea as well. How do you create art without falling into those patterns and slipping into the mix of that?
You join Muck Spreader.
First off, you join Muck Spreader, and secondly, I did a degree in fine art. And all that seemed to do for myself was to basically put me off for a very long time the idea of creating art in that way, either painting or sculpture or photographs. It put me off, probably for wrong reasons. But for me, the beauty of music is that it can be created for free. using anything. You can make a rhythm. You can make a note out of an inanimate object. And the beauty is once you've got your microphone and a recording device, you can then capture that and you can spread that out. So you can use these tools that exist around us, which could be seen as evil, in order to spread something that's joyous, or spread something that really shows your inner workings and what's going on inside you. And it doesn't take pencils or paper or using metal or wood or concrete. It's around us. I mean, you could say that, yeah,
sometimes it's just a conversation.
Exactly.
That's what a podcast is sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. That's why, again, we're so grateful to be brought on to do this, because we love to chat. And this is the perfect sort of format for us, you know.
We should have sent you a photo of the setup that we've done ourselves here. sitting in a couple of recliners.
Yeah, a couple of recliners, looking at the flat that I used to live in opposite in the council block. This where I lived in a guardian scheme, and now that's been knocked down to make space for the new houses, where all the people from the estate here in the borough of Hackney, just on the edge of Shoreditch, and we're looking at the new build, the Union Jack flags on the old estate, and seeing this like
the
constant change, the driving factors of what makes a city keep needing to grow is to constantly consume and create more money.
You spoke about this, I think, a little bit as well in the Vivienne Westwood thing you did. You know, how we're living through this time where it feels like everything is kind of crashing and burning and eating itself alive.
Yeah. There's no way that this is sustainable.
Where does it stop, though? How does it stop?
With Muck Spreader, we're trying to create a mass awakening so that we can rush forward the stopping. I'm not sure it's going to happen in my lifetime, but I believe that a change is going to come, as Sam Cooke said. But you look like now we're leaving it down to people like Greta Thunberg. She's a young girl and she's having to have to wait with. I have so much faith in this new generation and the way that they're protesting and standing up for the rights and being anti-discriminatory against everything. I think once we get these old middle-class white guys out of parliament, that eventually we will end up with governments that more represent the people, because the generation beneath us, they're hungry for change. They're so much more aware of it than what I've ever, in my lifetime, that I've noticed. And I speak with my family and my friends that are older. They've never known a generation like this with so much hunger in order to change it. That's accelerating the crashing and the burning.
I think that also, to talk about how's it going to change, I don't know if it is going to change in our lifetimes, but I do believe that in terms of what someone can do as an individual, there's very small actions that have a huge impact, because we are sort of enslaved by the idea of consumerism. We are enslaved by this idea that you have to have this, that and the other. A perfect example, and I mean the man's a footballer, but if you got a guy like Ronaldo going into a press interview and moving 2 bottles of Coca-Cola and then holding up a bottle of water and saying,
dropping the share price by 2 billion,
4 billion, those kind of actions, yes, he has got a platform, and yes, he's got that position through his skill in football, but what he is saying and what that gesture means to anyone is that you have a choice. Something like Coca-Cola is not good for you. Something like Coca-Cola is put alongside sporting events, which Coca-Cola admits itself there is absolutely no nutritional value to drinking Coca-Cola. You might as well just be eating sugar. But if you say to yourself, if I can stop Coca-Cola growing by just not buying Coca-Cola. It's like things like that are very simple. It's like, I'm not going to buy 6 or 7 outfits this year. I'm going to use the ones I've got. I'm going to go buy second-hand clothes. You know, there's so many little actions you can take.
It's each individual constantly remembering, if we can all as individuals try to make the right decision, the best that we can, then change will come. It's about understanding the power. Like, as a consumer, you're voting with your wallet. Everywhere that you spend a pound, a dollar, a Riyadh, a fucking Dallasy, therefore you're choosing what you're investing in, what you're giving power to, is where you're spending your money, because ultimately it is money that's running this thing.
Money talks, and that's the thing. If we can decide,
so someone give us some money.
Yeah. So if you can decide that this product does better things for my body, this planet, the people around me, then then buy that thing, because money is part of this structure. It's like, you know, yeah, we could live in a fantasy where we don't have money, but it's part of the consumerism. We live in the end of the capitalist era, man, and this is like the amount of corporate politics that goes on that really affects our government, and who, you know, I could bring up many examples.
Let's just, for one moment, we'll look at Israel and Palestine. What reason do us as Britain have to see an end to that conflict when we are the major suppliers of arms and weapons to Israel? What need is it for us to see a de-escalation of violence and those people to be given back their human rights, to be let out of like a prison, basically, when we're constantly profiting off of it hugely? Obviously, they're not going to stop, because again, they're already concerned only with money. There's no need for people whatsoever in terms of the eyes of the government and the overbearing powers. It's all on money.
There's a huge disparity between political decisions and us as people. Look
at the summit. Look at the G7 summit that just happened. Those guys breaking all of the laws that they've put in against us with social distancing, completely interacting as normal. And we're just meant to be like, oh, great. What, you lot have all flown in from all over the world to try and tackle climate change. Boris Johnson flew from London to Cornwall to go and give a talk about how we're going to change and save the environment.
Yeah, I think
the paradox is hilarious.
Yeah, there's a train I think he could have taken, but it's just,
there's a bicycle he could have rode. He promoted bicycles enough, didn't he? We're still calling these bikes Boris bikes here. He's so big on cycling. He could have cycled to Lanzarote.
I think that's for the biggest issue is that government and corporation are lying so close to each other in that bed now that as a member of a society, it's almost indistinguishable how political policies are created and how the interests of kind of corporation and capital is being pushed into an idea of political policy. Does that make sense?
Yeah. But how does it become separated? Because you're saying that we're living in the end of the kind of capitalist era. What's going to pull that apart so that we can move forward?
Us as individuals.
Well, us as individuals. But like, even if you look like, I spend most of my time in London, so I can say like the rise of independent businesses is massive. People are moving away from big chains and stuff. It's these are the smaller things of it going away. Like if you look at, was it John Lewis or Debenhams, whatever that man Philip Green owned, collapsing. You see that these huge corporations are slowly falling apart.
I think that to go back to it, it's like as individuals, we can decide where we want to put our money. We can decide on where the capital is placed. And if you can start making decisions on a daily basis of, I'm going to buy this thing because it's organic. If you can't afford it, then you have to buy what you can afford. But it's just to have that in your head. It is to vote with your feet. Don't buy Coca-Cola. That's basically it. I mean, it's simple. Don't buy off clothing companies that use sweatshops that pollute the environment, that have slave workers. You know, it's simple, but that we're constantly being.
And the more that you're in poverty, the less that your choices are allowed.
Exactly.
Like the less money you have, the less right you are able to make these decisions. That you'll need to go to other places. Is like to be poor, you have to take whatever option is available to you. Essentially, to get the food the cheapest you can. You don't have the luxuries of thinking of organics, and it's coming. I have full faith in this coming and this changing. That we can't go on like this.
Decentralization of power. Just stop shouting at us from the centre and let people have communities. Let people know their neighbours again. It feels so fragmented. Well, I'm talking from a London perspective. I mean. If you go up north, or if you go down to Devon, or if you go to Cornwall, there's all sorts of other issues with how land ownership is done, with how housing is done, how house prices, man. That's a whole different ballgame.
So like this, the issues of housing here is ridiculous. You know, like the whole city. There's not many people even left from London in London anymore. They're moved out because you ain't good enough. You can't afford to live this close to the centre of town. We're moving like Paris with the bagnoles, where you push the people out far to the suburbs. If you don't see the problem, it's easy to ignore. where London's based on communities with huge council estates next to millionaires, and everybody's very mixed down here compared to other cities. Like in Brazil, you've got the favelas. In Naples, you've got Scampia, which is just on the outskirts, where they try to push you away. But in London, initially it went wrong and we were all mixed together, and now they're slowly trying to get rid of all the trouble. Push us away, get rid of us, hate us.
Take us from our homes.
A lot of what we've been speaking about, it's coming back again to boys a little bit in terms of the idea of the individual and the artist being able to kind of galvanize the revolution and make an impact.
100%. This is like the power of, I just want to, from me personally, is empower each individual to feel strong enough to like make their own decisions based upon themselves. And I have enough faith in human beings that the majority of people will make the right decision. Like, I regularly go around challenging racists and homophobes and any sort of bigotry, and people tell me not to.
Why do people tell you not to? What's the reasoning for that when you
Because they
question them
fear
all?
that it will end in violence. Because, so for example, yesterday I was in a pub in Deptford and a man had a white power t-shirt on. I'm with my friend from Jamaica and my other friend from Iraq, and this man's in a white power t-shirt. He starts saying something, and I say, I'm going to confront him. They're like, Luke, please, we don't have a fight. And I was like, no, let me confront him. So I take him to one side outside, have a cigarette, and ask him, why are you wearing this? Like, your hands are swollen, you've got a black eye and broken foot. He's like, I keep finding myself in trouble. And I was like, well, because you're wearing this flagrant disregard for the majority of people. And he's like, oh, you must be some sort of Antifa. And I was like, no, I'm not Antifa. I'm humankind. And I challenge him, and his views aren't racist. It's the same way. I've got a black mate, they'll stand there and be racist to you, but my mate's black. It's an ignorance and a fear to step out. Like, they fear that they'll be persecuted. They don't even believe these things. If I had the opportunity, I would smite Tommy Robinson, Stephen, whatever his real name is, where he has to hide in a segregated wing. There's no time for these views, not in 2021.
He's also a symptom as well, though.
Yeah, he's a symptom, but he perpetuates it. Lots of people, like where I come from, like Stephen Lawrence was murdered at the end of my road, so it's very prevalent in the area where I grew up in Eltham. It's like known as the home of almost the BNP. It's severely racist, and these people, when you take them one-on-one without the crowd as individuals, their beliefs are not that. They will treat everybody equal in it, but they feel a fear of persecution, of not acceptance. But together they feel validated, as if they're powerful. It's the same as football hooligans. None of those guys are tough. You ask any of those guys for a one-on-one stand-up fisticuffs, not one of them wants them. They look around and try to find their friends.
I think the space that Tommy Robinson, Nigel Farage, to some degrees Donald Trump have occupied is a space that has been created by the online, by places like Facebook, by places like Twitter. It gives people it's giving people who feel this anger or this isolation, and it gives people, I think people naturally want to be part of something. We come from hunter-gatherers. We've always had little groups that we want to be part of, and what an online platform, yeah, exactly, and what an online platform does is it will perpetuate things, these bad thoughts people have, and give them a platform where it becomes normalized, and actually it breeds ignorance because they only talk within certain structural frameworks. It's not more than that.
And again, having to look to the next generation to do this, we're having man like Marcus Rashford stand up to the politician. He's a 21 or 22-year-old boy, part of this next generation who stands up for this online hatred of people perpetually in their communities. And those same people will be wearing an England shirt and they'll be celebrating Raheem Sterling scoring at the weekend.
There's an irony. There's a massive irony to it. But it's funny how the two people we've mentioned who are dealing with things is one's a Portuguese football player and the other one's an England football player.
And the other one's a young girl from Sweden.
Yeah.
But these people are part of a next generation that hopefully we come through and just say, we don't accept this anymore. And if all of us stand up against it, like on an individual level with interactions, you challenge people, not with aggression, but just with with a need to, like, an inquiring mind to try and understand someone. And the more you make them explain their thought of pattern being wrong and let them keep explaining it, they slowly realize themselves, wow, what I'm saying sounds insane.
And ignorant.
And it's only, like, again, it's education and fear.
Is there almost a failure of the media in that regard as well then? Because if these people have platforms like Trump and whatever, why aren't they being taken down?
Well, if you look, like, we take Corbyn as an example,
because he never answers a question.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that it's the media's role is to give balanced and fair opinions on very important issues. Are they doing that? I don't know if they are. Again, it comes back to the money. Follow the big money. Where's the big money at? And I think that that's that for me is the reason that it what sells newspapers, what sells media is sold on conflict, media is sold on anger, media at the moment it seems to be sold on things that make people have fear. And like we it's funny how we moved from the age of terrorism, which at the base of it is terror, is being scared, and we've moved into this kind of new corona era, which is real, and it's a fear of dying. It's it's something that's very emotive, and the media perpetuates a narrative which is there. And I mean, is it conspiratorial to say it, but is it something to do with bigger businesses who have investments, who have capital, who are throwing it into these corporations? Are the media outlets owned by too small a group of people? I mean, that could be one argument, or it's just that the people who are reading newspapers want simplistic, and they don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole of how is this actually working. I think it's
Now, the impact of the newspaper for me personally, I lived with my grandparents for a while. They're both working class. My granddad ran market stalls in South London, and my grandma worked in a bank, but they both come from working class people. Now they've always voted Labour. Now in later life, they vote Tory. They read the Daily Mail. They read the Daily Mail delivered to the door every day. I would read it with them. And you can see how much it influences their opinions on immigration, on the royal family, on these things. If you, like, people literally take the newspaper and believe it as gospel. Like, even the Evening Standards here, if you look, I don't know if it's gone across the UK, but it's a free newspaper, and one of the columnists was fucking Boris Johnson and George Osborne. And you see now they have the same cronyism and support. It's run by a Russian oligarch, and they have the same cronyism and support for Boris now he's in power, because he was an editor. He's a friend of the paper.
I mean, on a smaller scale, well, that's the same reason that someone like Jeremy Clarkson is still allowed to survive in the mainstream. Because he's friends with everyone.
There's a funny story. We played a gig in a members club in West London, and we go upstairs, and there's old Clarkson, and Jack, who plays guitar in our band, is a big boy. He's maybe 6'5", and Clarkson sat there upstairs with two 20-something-year-old birds on his lap. Takes both of the girls into the toilet with him to do whatever he decides to do. Maybe I hear him sniffling, maybe I don't. But he goes up to Jack and he's all right. You're all right, boy, little boy. He's only about an inch taller than him. The smugness of this man. We're here as Muck Spreader to eradicate that.
Yeah. The only thing to say on the other side of this, though, is that it's not good to cancel people too much. I think that to overreact to what people say is not a good thing. I think
that's harmful.
Yeah, I think everyone deserves a platform to say what they want to say. That's kind of integral to being in a free society. I don't think that we should harbour views or that are negative towards others. I think that those views should be discussed
and challenged,
and in a way that doesn't come across as, you said something I don't like, I'm going to delete you, because by that you're marginalizing people more. And what we should be trying to do is bring people in and everyone feel coherent together. That's how things move forward rather than backwards, Yeah,
validating every opinion, whether you agree with it or disagree with it. It's the ability to compromise. It's the same with us as a band, like with the way that we make our music, is like compromise is a constant part of it, to like give up your own vision in order for the collective to make a sound coherent together. If one person decides to run off on their own tangent, then it ruins the whole of it.
It works. It has a framework around it.
But you must succumb.
Exactly. You have to remember that your inward has to be part of the outward of the whole creation. And I think it's a metaphor for the way the wider world should work. Is that everyone should be given their individuality, but also see it in the context of a wider society.
Back to the name of Muck Spreader, the whole thing's about throwing away a load of waste and filth in order to fertilize new ground, to grow something new from it. If you're out in the fields, they go spread muck in order to bring up crops that we can eat, that they can feed the cows on. I don't want to go into the issue of feeding the cows and the greenhouse gases it produces and eating meat, but...
Well, that's something else you kind of touch upon a little bit on the EP, is animal cruelty and this kind of mass market slaughtering. So little respect for animals, man.
Even it's the whole thing again of representing the underdog, those that don't have voices. Animals don't have voices. I believe they have deep social constructs as deep as ours in emotional intelligence, but because we don't understand it, we believe we can take priority over it.
They're sentient beings like we are. Just because they can't verbally communicate with us, they're there in the same capacity as we are. That's what I think. And to be honest, if you can't kill an animal yourself, don't eat one.
Back when I was dumb and a carnivore.
Exactly.
Is a lyric from one of the tunes.
I think that's 50 pictures of your dad, isn't it?
Yeah, 50 pictures of your dad. Back when I was dumb and a carnivore in a white suit at Carnival. But he's
bars. Note about those bars.
Wore the same suit for 3 days.
You've done your research, my G. I'm very impressed. I
can sense you're a mucker.
Yeah.
When did you go veggie? When did you stop eating meat?
Maybe about 9 years ago now. But now I eat fish because I did feel weak, but mainly only oysters. And if I'm at a restaurant or something, because I'm too poor to afford to eat fish on my own at home, it's so much cheaper eating only vegetables. But I was with an amazing woman who was vegan and had started eating, and I was eating meat around her. Then I was coming back from Spain and I ate a bacon sandwich at the airport. That brought me close to the edge. Then I got on an EasyJet flight and thought, I'll have a bacon sandwich. And that damn sandwich tasted so bad that I could never eat meat again.
I think as well, though, it's okay. This is another interesting thing, like what you were talking a little bit earlier on about cancel culture, which is that kind of staunch, my road, the high road or whatever. It's a similar thing with vegans sometimes. They can be very... You're allowed to have a slip up if you know.
Yeah, it's much more just to be conscious and aware. I'm not saying people don't eat meat, but like, if that is the staple of your diet, A, it's bad for your health. Primarily, if you're a selfish person, you're concerned with that. B, it's bad for the environment. C, it's bad economically. But if you do it and you're conscious of eating meat and everyone eats a little less than what they was doing, then it makes sense. Like diet for me, I only ate meat. Growing up, until I turned veggie, I only ate meat. I never tried a vegetable. The only vegetable I'd ever had was a raw carrot.
When I first started hanging out with Luke, he was the king of meat. The change that has come about in Luke is enlightening. You know, it's like I'd never tried a vegetable before I turned vegetarian. He would refuse to eat vegetables. I remember we would all wind him up about, go on, have that. No. So it's enlightening to I think that what you're saying about the cancel culture and veganism though is interesting, but I think that's just because to be a vegan it was maybe 10 years ago such a statement of who you were. Because I grew when I was in my early 20s, I was living in the squat scene. I was really active in protests and really on the ball with all this kind of stuff. A lot more active than maybe I should be now. But for me, I always used to make a joke that all my vegan mates who I was living with, they just enjoyed reading the back of packets just to go, well, I can't eat that. But we live in a different world. You know that it's changing because you can go and buy vegan versions of KFC. Do you know what I mean? You can go to fast food outlets now and buy vegan versions of stuff. So there's a shift. It's not so borderline as it used to be.
Yeah, it used to be something, a badge to wear again, it's that looking for your tribe and this.
it brought with it a whole load of ethical values potentially that meant that you were akin to other people who are vegans. But now I think it's diluted a bit, and I think it's like it's good to have a whole picture. Like Luke was saying, it's like you've got. Just because someone eats meat doesn't mean they're evil, doesn't mean they're bad. Just because someone's only a vegan doesn't mean they're an angel. Vegans can be arseholes too. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't give you this card to flash up when you walk into a club to be like, I'm vegan, I'm blessed. It's just like you've made conscious decisions with what you want to put into your body, because your body is a temple. So, you know, that doesn't mean that you doesn't mean you're
a selfish human being doing it for selfish reasons.
Exactly.
But loads of it does as well. Like another major influence is like Discord Records and Ian Mackay with Minor Threat and Fugazi, where those guys were completely militant on their straight edge vibes. Like I hearken, feel and relate to the message those guys were spreading and still spread strongly.
Lead by example.
Yeah, don't tell anyone what they've got to do, but just take care of yourself. Back to the individual bringing about change. Each person doing what is best for them, looking after themselves and trying in every opportunity to make the decision to be the best human they can.
Educate people, but don't patronise people.
What's the biggest change you've seen in each other since you've known each other?
Hey, we're like brothers. It's very close.
Yeah.
We've both grown up, you know. In 10 years or so of friendship, I'd say we've both grown a little. Maybe a few more facial hairs, a couple more wrinkles.
Couple more battle scars, couple more limps every now and then.
That ache in the morning after a heavy night.
But don't doubt it. The youthful energy has not left, and it shall never leave.
Like that's it. Again, age is a state of mind. Like I have friends in my 60s who are they're much younger than even the 19, 20, 21-year-olds that I know. More sprightly in their behaviours and their thoughts.
That's it.
It's a beautiful thing.
It is a beautiful thing, and we all have the power to do it.